Hello friends, and welcome back to this course titled as British Poetry. We have successfully completed 3 units of this course looking at Geoffrey Chaucer. The book which we considered for discussion was his seminal text, The Canterbury Tales. Specifically, we looked at the prologue to Canterbury Tales, the character of wife of Bath. On the other hand, we also looked at the tale narrated by wife of Bath regarding the Arthurian times and the knight. So after, let's say, completion of first 3 units, now I assume that you can understand that from why Chaucer is known as the father of English poetry or English literature, and what is his achievement, what he has given in the 14th century. Now from the 14th century we are moving towards the 17th century, the work of John Milton, which is epic poetry, epic style of writing poetry. John Milton has written Paradise Lost, 12 volumes, and then a sequel of Paradise Lost, which is known as Paradise Regained. Not so popular, but Paradise Lost is more popular than that book. Friends, it's an epic. And now as you can, let's say, believe that how many changes have occurred into this field of English literature in this 300 or 200 years time. From the 14th century, then we cross 15th century, then we cross 16th century, and now we are in the second half of the 17th century when this book got published. So almost 3 years time duration we have to cover, and we have to see that how this literature or this English has changed its form under the hands of John Milton, and what John Milton has to say in this book Paradise Lost. We will specifically emphasize on book 1 and book 9, which are prescribed in our syllabus. But as I already told you that there are 12 books which are written under the title Paradise Lost, and here and there we get the reference of the other books or the quotations from the other books to get a better idea of creating a holistic approach towards this epic Paradise Lost. So, without wasting much time, let us move towards the outcome of this lecture. Friends, this lecture will be of 30 minutes duration, and you would be able to adapt Paradise Lost as a seminal text. Why Paradise Lost is popular? Let's say, what is the introduction of Paradise Lost? In which context Milton has written this book Paradise Lost? All these things will be discussed in detail in this 30 minutes lecture. So, with this note, let us move towards the introduction to Paradise Lost. Written as an epic poem in the form of blank verse, Paradise Lost evokes the biblical narrative of the fall of man, which showcases how God's first human creation, Adam and Eve, disobeyed their father by falling prey to the temptation of Satan in the guise of a snake, and how they were expelled from the Garden of Eden or paradise. Friends, as you are aware that there is a biblical story. Biblical story is related to the first men and the first women created by God. This men and women, Adam and Eve, they used to live in the Garden of Eden, paradise, which was created by God. Everything was perfect in their life. And then they were tempted by Satan, who was the rebellious son of God. And thus the downfall of Adam and Eve happens from that Garden of Eden to earth. Earth is a place where they had to suffer till their death. And still the process is going on with the children of Adam and Eve, you and me, and with, let's say, all the human beings on earth. So we can, let's say, from the first point, we can understand that this poem Paradise Lost is written in blank verse. Now, what is blank verse? Blank verse is a form of poetry which is written in iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter means 10 syllables in one line, and the lines are rhyming with each other. So, iambic pentameter, blank verse, these are both related to each other. So, this is related to the style of poetry writing. And basically the concern is God's first human creation, or the God's first disobeying by human beings. Milton's primary objective was to showcase the consequences of man's first disobedience, and in this process uphold the importance of submitting to the will and grace of God. Friends, we can understand from this story that if we go against the will of God, if we go against the grace of God, what will be the repercussions? Milton was a religious person, believed in Christianity, and he believed in the supremacy of God. And that supremacy is clearly visible in this story, The Paradise Lost. The poem also captures the biblical story of how Satan or Lucifer was defeated and banished to hell or Tartarus. Friends, this story is not only about Adam and Eve, but about the, let's say, angels and, let's say, the complete story of Satan. We see that how Satan or Lucifer or other, let's say, supporting angels of Satan, how they were defeated from the army of God and how they were banished to hell or Tartarus. In fact, Paradise Lost captures the ethos of the Puritan age so accurately that it has been referred to as the dream of a Puritan fallen asleep over his Bible. Friends, there are, let's say, comments which passed on this book Paradise Lost, and we can understand from this comment written in this point that Paradise Lost is a form of, let's say, ethos of Puritan age. What Puritan age was all about? What does it had to say about humanity? What message Puritan age to which Milton belonged has to give to the all human beings? And that is the dream of a Puritan fallen asleep over his Bible. This is a comment passed on John Milton. Comment suggests that John Milton was a fond of reading Bible, and he has fallen asleep and seen a dream, and in that dream he had seen Paradise Lost, and then he narrated it in the form of a book. So this is a Puritan voice. Paradise Lost is a Puritan demand, somewhere came out from the core of the heart of John Milton. The following section will provide a brief summary of the 12 books of Paradise Lost. So friends, from now we will see that how step by step the story moves ahead. We will see the summary of all 12 books of Paradise Lost, the chain of events, how things happened one after the other, so that you can get an idea of how, let's say, the story begins and how it ends in this volume of 12 books. First, let us talk about book 1. The epic poem begins in the lake of fire in hell, where Lucifer and his rebel angels have fallen after being expelled from heaven by God. So friends, a very, let's say, interesting scene from where the story begins. There is a lake of fire, and in that lake of fire there are many angels whose bodies are lying here and there. They are thrown in that fire of hell from heaven by the, let's say, wrath of God. So these are known as rebel angels under the supremacy of Satan. However, in spite of the abominable suffering, Lucifer's spirit is not defeated as he rises from the lake and addresses the rebel angels from the pandemonium. Now what happens, that all these angels built a let's say castle for their king, who is Satan. The name of that castle is Pandemonium, and from that pandemonium Lucifer gives a, let's say, very beautiful speech to motivate the angels who are now completely demotivated and out of order. Aided by his devout followers, Mammon and Beelzebub, he seeks to take revenge by poisoning the minds of God's new beloved creation, that is mankind. Now friends, these people, these dirty minds, these fallen angels, they want to take revenge from God, but God is very powerful. Then how to take revenge? Now they think of poisoning the, let's say, objects which God loved most, the beloved Adam and Eve, the beloved mankind, the creations of God, and thus in this way, by poisoning Adam and Eve, they would be able to take revenge from God. This is the story of book 1. Now let us move to book 2. What is there to discuss in book 2? The rebel angels, led by Lucifer, began to debate whether they should lodge another war against the Creator or whether they should indulge in tainting mankind. Now in the book 2, there is a, let's say, discussion happens between the rebel angels. The people start debating that whether they should directly, let's say, raise a war against the Creator or the God, or they should indulge in tainting mankind. What would be the best method to follow in this situation? However, they were not sure about the existence of the human race yet. Hence, one of them had to go back to the realms of paradise and confirm the existence of the remote creation of God. Then, after, let's say, debate and discussion, these people decide that one must go to heaven and should give a report of the creations of God. What are they doing? What is their existence? And what is their, let's say, what they used to do there? When no one volunteered to do the task, Lucifer himself stepped up, and on crossing the hell gate, he saw the great gulf between heaven and hell. Now what happens that these, let's say, rebel angels, they are afraid. They do not want to go to heaven because they think that God is going to become very angry on them. Now Lucifer decides to do that. When he steps out of the hell, he sees that there is a great gulf which is made between the heaven and hell. Like Odyssey and Aeneas' journey, Lucifer faced all the dangers of the abyss, and after a tedious journey through chaos, he reached the periphery of God's newly created material world and later the garden of paradise. Now what happens that Lucifer is again a very strong angel. He crosses that, let's say, gulf. Then just like the books journeys of Odyssey and Aeneas, the ancient Greek characters, Lucifer faces, let's say, many dangers of abyss, and then there is a tedious journey, a very, let's say, tiresome, complex journey of chaos, and after that he reaches to the, let's say, garden of paradise. At this point, book 2 ends. Now let us talk about book 3. What is the story of book 3? In the third book, God is seen seated with his son Christ in heaven, and on seeing Lucifer fly towards heaven, he foretells that Lucifer would be able to pervert mankind. Now, as all of you know, that God is omniscient, but he steps into something only after some circumstances. So here God has seen that Lucifer is flying towards heaven, and Lucifer has some, let's say, some negative kind of feedback about the humanity, what Lucifer is going to do to humanity, to mankind. However, God was willing to pardon the sins of human race if someone was willing to take the burden of man's sin and die for it. But then God is, let's say, talking these things with his son Christ, where he says that maybe if some other person takes the responsibility of sins of mankind, human beings, and can die for those human beings, then God may forgive the sins of human race completely. The Son of God readily offered to die for the sins of the human race, and hence he was sent to earth as Christ, the Savior of mankind. And from here, friends, we get this story that the Son of God, Jesus Christ, decides to take birth on earth to behave as a savior of mankind, to take all the sins of human beings on his head. Meanwhile, Satan pretends to be a devout angel and manages to fool the guardian angel Uriel. Uriel, unable to recognize Satan, allows him to enter paradise. Now what happens? That there is a guardian angel of paradise, Uriel, and Satan was able to befool Uriel, and this is how he enters into paradise. So with this, book 3 ends. Let us now move to book 4. Now what is book 4? On evening paradise, Satan takes the guise of a vulture, and even though he feels pity for the innocent Adam and Eve, he is also jealous of them. Now in the beginning of book 4, we see that Satan transforms himself into a vulture to take a quick look on what is there in the heaven. He is also feeling jealous of the comfortable life of Adam and Eve. He visits Eve in her dream and tempts her to disobey God by eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Now Satan has some mysterious powers. He was an angel. So he comes into the dream of Eve, and then he tempts Eve to disobey God, eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Meanwhile, Uriel warns Gabriel, the guardian angel of paradise, about the evil spirit that had entered in the garden. Now what happens, that Uriel also, let's say, feels something suspicious. Although the Satan was able to befool Uriel, but Uriel talks to, let's say, Gabriel, or warns Gabriel, the guardian angel of the paradise, about the evil spirit that had entered the garden. Something wrong is going to happen now. Just about the moment when Gabriel and Satan were going to fight, a signal ushered through heaven, and Satan fled from paradise. Now Gabriel, as you know, that is the guardian angel of paradise, and there is a fight which is, let's say, which is going to start between Gabriel and Satan. Suddenly a signal comes to Gabriel from heaven, and let's say Satan immediately flees from paradise because he feels afraid of the power of God. So with this, book 4 ends. Now let us move to book 5. Eve is haunted by the disturbing dream. However, Adam consoles her and tells her that she has been blessed with the ability to choose and assert her willpower. So, what do we see in the beginning of book 5? Eve wakes up, she had seen a very bad dream and she is afraid now. But Adam is there to console her. He says that she has been blessed. Why? Because she can choose and assert her willpower into her, let's say, deeds, her acts. Meanwhile, the omnipotent God sends the archangel Raphael, who warns Adam and informs him about the presence of an evil spirit who had come to taint mankind. Now what happens? That God knows that something wrong is going to happen in paradise. So God now, after Gabriel, sends Raphael. Now Raphael warns Adam that there is some, let's say, evil spirit which has now come to paradise, and that evil spirit is going to taint mankind by tempting Adam and Eve. On Adam's query, Raphael narrates about the happenings before the creation of mankind. Now Adam wants to know about creation of mankind. So there is a, let's say, long discussion which happens between Adam and Raphael, where Raphael narrates Adam that what happened before the creation of mankind. Maybe these things are related to the creation of paradise by God. With this, book 5 ends. Let us now move to book 6. Raphael elaborates on the war that Lucifer lodges against his very creator, and how after being defeated they were banished from heaven and sent to hell. Now Raphael is still narrating the story to Adam, and then he narrates that Lucifer lodged against the very creator. There was a fight between these, let's say, angels and God, and after these, let's say, rebel angels were defeated, they were sent from heaven to hell. So with this, book 6 ends. It was a long discussion between Raphael and Adam. Then let us now move to book 7. In this book, Raphael goes on to enlighten Adam about the creation of the material world and why it was created. Again, there is a long speech of Raphael we can see in book 7, where Raphael is keep on talking about the, let's say, creation of material world, why it was created by God, and all the wishes and desires of God behind all these creations. With all these, let's say, dialogues by Raphael, book 7 ends. Let us now move to book 8. What is there in book 8? This book mainly captures Adam's speculation of his creator, God. So, what does, let's say, Adam speculates about God? What are Adam's opinions about God? What does he wish to say about God? Acknowledging the grace of the Almighty, he tells Raphael how God gave him everything that he wanted, including the companion Eve. Now, in this book 8, this person Adam, he narrates his story. He expected Eve, then he got Eve, and whatever he expected from the God, God has given him in the form of the paradise and Eve. In return, God had asked him not to have the fruit of the forbidden tree. So, whatever God had given Adam, he expected from the Adam that Adam must not eat the fruit of the forbidden tree. Raphael, after warning Adam against the dangers of falling prey to the temptation of Satan, for one last time takes his leave. And then finally, the discussion between Raphael and Adam gets over. Raphael says that Adam need to be little more cautious. From the temptations of Satan, he has to keep himself and Eve protected. And after that, Raphael leaves Adam's company, leaves paradise and goes back to God. With this, book 8 ends. Now, let us move to book 9, which is prescribed in our syllabus as well. Book 1 is also prescribed and book 9 is also prescribed. This book showcases how Satan, after returning to paradise and entering the body of a serpent, finally persuades Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. So friends, we are reaching to the climax in the story. Satan has now entered into the body of a, let's say, serpent, and then he tempts Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. On being coaxed by Eve, Adam hesitates. However, on seeing that Eve had already eaten the fruit and had disobeyed the Creator, he decides to embrace the fate of his beloved. So, when Adam came to know that Eve has eaten that forbidden fruit of knowledge, he also eats the same because he did not want to leave the company of Eve. On eating the fruit, they immediately fall from the grace of Almighty. The first disobedience of mankind was made. So in this way, we came to a conclusion that this was the first disobedience against God, which was committed by Adam and Eve by eating this fruit of knowledge. At this note, book 9 ends. Let us now move to book 10. The sin of mankind is known in heaven, and the Son of God is sent to earth. Adam repents his action and urges Eve to beg his forgiveness from God. Now friends, in the book 10, in the beginning of book 10, we see that now the heaven knows about this sin committed by Adam and Eve, which is why the Son of God, Christ, is sent to earth thereafter. Adam now repents his action, and then he urges Eve also to beg forgiveness from God, to pray from God for whatever they have committed, whatever wrong they have done. Meanwhile, Lucifer returns to hell, and while all the fallen angels were celebrating, they were turned into spineless serpents. Now what happens that when Lucifer returns to hell and there are fallen angels which were celebrating that they became successful for the downfall of Adam and Eve, they immediately turn into a spineless serpent, maybe by the, let's say, by the wrath of God. With this note, book 10 ends. Let us now move to the story of book 11. Even though the Son of God pleads forgiveness on behalf of Adam and Eve, God declares that they must leave heaven. Adam and Eve are led up to a hill, and the angels tell them all that would happen until the great flood. Now, we can see that Adam and Eve had now, let's say, their fate is decided, that they have to go to earth. Now, they go at the top of a hill for their downfall on earth. Angels tell them the complete story of everything which is going to happen in their future life before the great flood is going to come on earth. So with this, book 11 ends. Let us now talk about the last book, book 12. What is the story of book 12? In this last book, it is Michel who narrates the future. He describes how the Son of God would be born and how he would die for the sins of human race. So friends, book 12 is the story of Jesus Christ. How, let's say, the Son of God would be born and how, let's say, the sins of human beings will die at the end before the great flood. He also informs Adam about the condition of the churches in earth until the second coming of Christ. The epic ends with the Adam and Eve tearfully leaving paradise hand in hand and wandering off into the new world. So friends, we see in book 12 that there is a second coming of Christ which is going to happen on earth. What will be the condition of churches till that date? Is there any corruption? What will be the condition of religion? How people used to feel about religion? All these things were, let's say, discussed before Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are now tearful because they have to leave paradise, but they hand in hand, they wander off into the new world of earth. Much later, Milton published Paradise Regained in 1671. So, we can see that Paradise Lost was published in 1667, and 4 years after the publication of Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained was published, the sequel of Paradise Lost. Here, Satan's aspiration to tempt Jesus Christ is showcased in very simply style and was quite radical for the Puritan temperament. Christ here is portrayed much like a human being. Friends, when we talk about Paradise Regained, we see that the Satan is trying to, let's say, tempt Jesus Christ in a very simple style, quite radically, just like the Puritan temperament. So in this way, we can see that there is a Puritan temperament, Puritan zeal, which is clearly visible in the book Paradise Regained. And Jesus Christ is, let's say, behaving like a human being in that book. However, unlike Adam, he does not succumb to the temptations of Satan and hence emerges victorious. But in Paradise Regained, friends, we see that in this, let's say, tempting process of Satan and Christ wins because he, let's say, do not get tempted from the dialogues of Satan. However, this sequel hardly surpassed the glory of Paradise Lost, as it lacked much of the dramatic and ornate style of the later. So friends, all of us know that Paradise Lost is a more popular book than Paradise Regained. Paradise Regained was not able to create that kind of dramatic, let's say, impact or ornate style which Paradise Lost has created on the mind of the readers. So friends, I hope that in this brief description and step by step, let's say, sequencing of the acts in Paradise Lost and a basic introduction of Paradise Regained, you would be able to understand the introduction of Paradise Lost and a brief background and a summary of this book, Paradise Lost. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.